She walked into the jewelry shop with nothing but a baby in her arms and a necklace heavy with memories. All she wanted was milk. All he wanted was a ring for the wrong woman. But in that fleeting moment, where sacrifice met silence and kindness took root, everything changed. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The biting wind whipped down the street like it had something to prove, forcing Lena to pull her thin coat tighter around her baby. The child nestled into her chest, whimpering softly, not from the cold but from hunger. She hadn't been able to afford formula for 2 days, and her own strength was dwindling from skipping meals herself. Every corner she passed seemed to echo her despair. Lena's shoes, worn at the soles and splitting near the toes, shuffled across the sidewalk. Her eyes scanned the storefronts until they stopped at the small, slightly dusty sign, Gerald & Sons Jewelers, since 1949. Her heart pounded harder now, not from exertion, but from what she was about to do. She stood in front of the glass door, staring at her faint reflection. She looked older than 24. Her cheeks hollow, her hair looking disheveled, eyes shadowed with fatigue. Still, she adjusted her coat, kissed her baby on the head, and walked in. The bell above the door jingled faintly as she entered. The store was quiet, clean but unassuming. Gold chains and diamond rings gleamed under display lights, but Lena didn't look at them. Her focus was on the man behind the counter, an older gentleman in a navy cardigan, polishing a pair of cufflinks. He looked up, startled slightly by her entrance. "Yes. Can I help you?" he asked, his voice not unkind but cautious. Lena stepped forward, her arms tightening around the baby instinctively. I was hoping to sell something." He raised his brows. "Let's see what you've got." From under her coat, she carefully drew out a small, velvet pouch. Her hands trembled as she opened it and pulled out a delicate gold necklace with a tiny heart-shaped pendant. It caught the light just enough to reveal how well it had been cared for. "My mother gave it to me before she passed," Lena said softly, placing it on the counter. "It's the only thing I have from her." The jeweler inspected it closely with a magnifying lens. "It's beautiful. 14-karat gold, fine condition. Sentimental value like that. Are you sure you want to sell it?" Lena's throat tightened. She looked down at her child, who was now asleep in her arms, lips slightly parted. "Please, just give me a fair price," she whispered. "I need to buy milk and diapers." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause, filled only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. What neither Lena nor the jeweler noticed was that a man dressed in a charcoal gray coat, standing at the far end of the shop near the engagement ring display, had overheard everything. Adrian Wells, CEO of one of the city's leading tech firms, had come with a quiet plan. Choose a ring, propose to Clarissa by the weekend, and move on with his perfectly orchestrated life. But now he stood frozen, watching a woman about to part with a piece of her heart just to feed her child. The jeweler nodded, eyes softening. "I can give you $200. It's more than the melt value. It's what I'd give someone I respect." Lena nodded once, quickly. She didn't negotiate. She couldn't afford pride. "Thank you," she said. The jeweler handed her the cash, and she slipped it into her pocket with trembling hands. She hesitated for just a moment, her fingers brushing the velvet pouch one last time. Then she turned, clutching her child to her chest. Her eyes shimmered, but she held back the tears until she was outside. The bell jingled again as she left. Adrian watched her past the shop window. He could see it clearly now, the way her shoulders shook slightly as she walked away. The kind of pain that didn't need sound to be deafening. Slowly, almost absently, he walked over to the counter. "That necklace," he said to the jeweler. "I'll take it." The older man raised a brow. "Buying for someone?" Adrian didn't answer at first. He simply pulled out his wallet and laid down his black card. "Not anymore." The velvet box sat unopened on the passenger seat of Adrian Wells' black Aston Martin as the city skyline flickered against the windshield. The newly purchased heart-shaped necklace, still warm from the moment it had left the jeweler's hands, rested inside like a secret. He hadn't bought it for anyone. Not anymore. He drove through the city in silence, the low hum of the engine the only sound. His phone vibrated beside him. Clarissa again. He ignored it. Clarissa was perfect on paper. Daughter of a publishing mogul, polished, eloquent, always camera-ready. The tabloids loved them together. His board loved her. His PR team loved her. And for a time, Adrian thought he did too. But ever since he overheard that young mother's voice at the jewelry store, the desperation in it, the strength laced beneath it, he'd been haunted. The ring he'd picked out suddenly felt like a lie. Still, he was already late. He pulled up outside Le Jardin, a restaurant where every seat was booked a month in advance, and each dessert came with a silver spoon. A valet rushed forward. Adrian handed him the keys and stepped out, brushing a hand over his coat, checking that both the necklace and ring were still in place. They were. The maitre d' greeted him with a bow. Monsieur Wells, Miss Clarissa is already at your table. He nodded and followed the man inside, through warm lighting and soft classical music that felt deliberately slow, like time itself was being stretched for the rich. He glanced around, past the finely dressed couples and hushed laughter, toward the corner where a figure with blonde hair sat. At first, he smiled faintly. Clarissa looked radiant as always, in a red satin dress that shimmered with each shift of her shoulders. But something was off. Her body language. Her smile. She wasn't alone. She was leaning across the table, laughing. A man Adrian didn't recognize sat across from her, leaning in, fingers brushing hers over a half-drunk glass of wine. Clarissa didn't notice him. She didn't even glance toward the entrance. Adrian stopped in place. Every sound in the restaurant seemed to dull, muffled by the pounding of his heart. The maitre d' turned to him, confused. Monsieur. Adrian shook his head slowly. I won't be needing the table after all. He turned on his heel and walked out without another word. Back outside, the wind had picked up. It whipped against his face, tearing at his coat, but he barely felt it. His hands were fists in his pockets, clenched around velvet boxes that now seemed absurdly heavy. He walked. Past the restaurant. Past the valet calling after him. Past everything. He walked until the city lost its gleam, until the golden facades of wealth faded into shadows and silence. Eventually, he found a bench near a small park. He sat. He opened the engagement ring box first. The 2.5-carat diamond, flawless and cold, glinted under the streetlight. It looked sterile, calculated, like every part of his life. Then he opened the other box, the one from the jewelry store. The heart-shaped necklace shimmered softly. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It was beautiful because it meant something. And for reasons he didn't understand yet, it hurt more than the betrayal. Not because Clarissa was unfaithful, but because in that moment he knew he had never truly loved her. Not the way that poor young mother had loved her child. Not the way a person gives up something precious to keep someone else alive. He closed both boxes and slipped the necklace into his coat pocket. The ring stayed behind on the bench. No headlines. No public confrontation. No drama. Just a man who realized that everything he'd built had left him completely, utterly alone. Adrian Wells disappeared. Not from the public eye, not entirely. His name still made headlines, his company still soared, and he still arrived to quarterly board meetings in tailored suits with slides and forecasts no one dared question. But inside, something had unraveled. Quietly. Invisibly. In the days following the incident at Le Jardin, Adrian declined every social engagement. He stopped responding to Clarissa's texts, even after her tone shifted from casual to defensive to bitterly apologetic. The tabloids speculated, of course. Power couple split? And where is Clarissa? But Adrian gave no interviews. There was no statement. Instead, he existed in autopilot. He woke in his penthouse each morning, alone, the panoramic view of the city no longer inspiring but suffocating. His apartment, once modern and sleek, felt hollow, like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. The minimalist furniture mocked him. The silence was louder than any noise. Every night, he'd take long walks through the city streets, aimless, like a man trying to outrun thoughts that wouldn't leave him alone. And always, the necklace was in his coat pocket. The first few days, he'd reach for it mindlessly. At meetings, during phone calls, while making coffee. His thumb would brush the velvet box like a reflex, grounding him in something real, something soft. He didn't even know why he kept it with him. It wasn't for Clarissa. He hadn't even thought of giving it to her. No, the necklace didn't belong in that world of curated affection and press photos. It belonged to someone else. Someone who had stood in that jewelry shop with unwashed hair, tired eyes, and a baby in her arms, asking for fairness, not pity. He couldn't forget her voice, or the way she cradled her child like a shield and a prayer. She had no idea he'd bought the necklace. No idea who he was. And yet, she had made a crack in the armor he'd spent his whole life forging. Adrian found himself returning to the little velvet box each night. He'd sit by the fireplace, one he never used, and open it carefully, like it was sacred. The necklace lay there, heart-shaped, simple, still. One night, close to midnight, he set it down on the polished kitchen island and stared at it for a long time. He whispered aloud to the empty room, "Why can't I forget you?" The silence answered back. Weeks passed. He canceled the apartment renovation he'd been planning with Clarissa. He called off the vacation. He even missed a black tie gala his team insisted he attend, saying simply, "I'm not in the mood for champagne and fake smiles." The PR team nearly panicked. "Are you sure you want to stay single right now?" The engagement made investors feel secure. Clarissa was a good image match, his assistant had said during a tense Zoom call. Adrian stared blankly at the camera. "Do I look like I care about image?" Click. He shut the laptop and walked out onto the balcony, the evening wind biting at his jaw. He looked out at the sea of lights across the city and felt disconnected. As if he stood above the life he used to live, peering down at someone else's ambition. That night, while taking off his coat, something fell to the floor with a dull thud. The necklace. It had slipped from his pocket unnoticed. Adrian bent down slowly and picked it up, cradling it in his hand. The metal felt cold at first, but warm after a moment, as though it recognized his touch. He stared at it. Then, for the first time in weeks, a thought rose that was more than guilt or grief or silence. I have to find her. Not to ask anything of her. Not even to return the necklace. He just needed to know, had life been kind to her since that day? Did her baby have what he needed now? Did she have milk in her fridge, heat in her home, and someone to remind her that she mattered? Because someone who sacrifices something precious should not be forgotten by the world. And suddenly, without planning it, Adrian knew where he'd go in the morning. The next morning, Adrian woke before the sun. It wasn't his usual kind of waking, not the automatic reflex to alarms and calendar notifications. No, this was something else. A stirring. A reason. His penthouse, with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, felt colder than usual, but for once he didn't care. He didn't check his phone. He didn't skim the stock market or respond to messages from his assistant. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out the velvet box. Inside, the necklace still lay nestled, heart-shaped and quietly radiant. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he dressed, not in his usual tailored suit, but in jeans, a black turtleneck, and a charcoal overcoat. Something simple, unassuming. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. He didn't care. By 7:15 a.m., he was walking down the same street that had become a pivot point in his life. Gerald and Sons Jewelers stood where it always had, tucked between a florist and a shuttered bookstore, its windows still a bit dusty, its display still modest. The city was slowly waking. Trash trucks rumbled in the distance. A woman opened her coffee shop, flicking on neon lights. Adrian stood across the street, watching the sidewalk like a sentinel. Waiting. Hours passed. He didn't check the time. Didn't pace. He just waited, scanning every face. The morning rush came and went. An old man fed pigeons on a bench nearby. A couple argued quietly outside the florist. Still no sign of her. He was beginning to wonder if perhaps it was foolish. Maybe she had moved. Maybe she'd only been there that one day. Then, just as he turned to glance down the side street, he saw her. She was walking out of a small, rundown grocery store, pushing the door open with her shoulder, a brown paper bag clutched in one arm, her baby in the other. She looked different, still tired, yes, but stronger somehow. Her hair was cleaner, tied back neatly. Her coat was the same, but the way she carried herself had changed. There was a calm determination in her step. Adrian's heart caught in his throat. For a moment he froze, unsure of how to move, how to speak, how to exist in this moment that he'd imagined for weeks. But then she saw him. Their eyes met across the sidewalk. She paused mid-step, confused, maybe wary. He crossed the street slowly. I'm sorry to bother you," he said gently as he approached. "Do you remember the day you went into Gerald and Sons? A few weeks ago." She blinked. Yes." Her arms instinctively adjusted, bringing her baby closer to her chest. Her eyes were clear but cautious. "I was there. I heard you speak to the jeweler." He hesitated, then slowly reached into his coat and pulled out the box. She took a step back, her brows furrowing. "I'm not trying to sell you anything," Adrian said quickly, voice calm and respectful. "This is your necklace. I bought it the same day. I saw how hard it was for you to part with it. I've kept it ever since." She stared, lips slightly parted. He opened the box. The moment her eyes landed on the necklace, everything in her face changed. Her lips trembled. Her eyes glassed over. I can't take that," she whispered. "I sold it because I had to. I needed." "I know," Adrian interrupted softly. "And that's the only reason I'm giving it back. No strings. No expectations. I just wanted to return what was yours." Lena looked at him, really looked at him. "Why?" "I guess because I couldn't forget your voice," he said. "Or your strength. Or how it made me realize I've spent most of my life valuing the wrong things." There was silence between them. A sacred kind. The kind that speaks more than words ever could. Lena looked down at her baby, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. She reached out slowly, as though afraid the necklace might vanish. Her fingers brushed the gold, and she pulled it toward her chest like something holy. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. "You're welcome," Adrian replied, smiling softly. "May I walk you home?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. It's just around the corner." They walked in silence for a while, the city moving around them. Adrian carried her grocery bag, so she could hold her baby with both hands. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pry. She broke the silence. "My name's Lena, by the way." "I'm Adrian." She paused. "You're not just a guy who hangs around jewelry stores, are you?" Adrian chuckled. "No. I run a tech firm. It's boring, trust me." She smiled. A real one this time. The first one he'd seen. When they reached her apartment building, a narrow walk-up, better than he expected but still modest, he handed her the bag and said, "I know this might sound strange, but I'd like to help. If you're okay with that." Lena tilted her head. "Help how?" "You deserve more than surviving," he said simply. "Would you be open to coming by my office? Just to talk. I run a nonprofit branch. We help single parents re-enter the workforce. Job placement, housing support, daycare. You wouldn't owe me anything. I just think you have so much more to give." She studied him again, long and deep. She didn't see pity in his eyes. She saw respect. After a moment, she nodded. "Okay." And just like that, something shifted in both of them. The faintest movement of the heart, like the turning of a page neither knew they were meant to write together. The building that housed Adrian's nonprofit initiative stood on the east side of the city, a modern, airy structure tucked behind the glass towers of his corporate empire. It was a place most people didn't associate with CEOs and billion-dollar deals. But that was the point. No gold nameplates. No marble statues. Just real help and real people. On a rainy Wednesday morning, Lena stood outside its doors, umbrella tucked under one arm, a borrowed blazer hanging loose over her thrift store dress. She had left baby Noah with a kind elderly neighbor she barely knew. Just for an hour, she'd promised. She wasn't sure why she felt nervous. Maybe because the last few years had been survival. No handouts, no favors, just sheer willpower. But here she was, standing before a building she wouldn't have dared to enter a month ago. And all because of a man who returned her mother's necklace. She stepped inside. The lobby surprised her. It wasn't cold or corporate. The walls were warm-toned, the furniture simple and welcoming. A few children played in a corner room with a teacher, and a receptionist with friendly eyes offered her tea the moment she walked in. "Lena?" A voice called from a side hallway. She turned. Adrian stood there, not in a suit this time, but a button-up shirt with rolled sleeves and casual slacks. He smiled as he approached, a hand tucked into his pocket. "I'm glad you came." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I didn't know what to expect." "Just people who want to help," he said gently. "Come on, let me show you something." He led her through a series of rooms. Open workspaces filled with young parents in training programs, learning bookkeeping, graphic design, project management. Some were on computers. Others were gathered in small groups. She saw a board labeled "Resumes Submitted," with dozens of names underneath. Adrian stopped outside a bright office and gestured for her to sit. "We partner with several companies willing to hire single parents, even those with gaps in their work history. We also provide daycare scholarships, transportation support, and, if needed, temporary housing until things stabilize." Lena blinked, still absorbing it all. Why do you even run something like this?" Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Because I built a life that was full of everything, except meaning. Then I saw someone sell something priceless to keep her child fed. That moment rewired something in me." Lena's throat tightened. She lowered her eyes. "I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me." "This isn't pity," he said, voice quiet but steady. "It's investment. In someone I believe in." She looked up slowly. Something in his gaze held her there, steady, honest, free of judgment. A few minutes later, a woman named Alicia, the program director, entered and began discussing placement opportunities. They discovered Lena had once worked as a customer service rep before she got pregnant and had solid communication skills. Alicia mentioned an opening in the nonprofit's donor outreach team. "It's part-time at first, but flexible hours," Alicia said. "And we have a nursery on site if you ever need to bring your baby. The job comes with benefits, and there's room for growth." Lena stared at the offer in her hands. It felt surreal, paper and ink giving her something she hadn't dared to hope for, a future. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Adrian said simply. And she did. Later that week, Lena moved into a new apartment. Not a luxury condo or a penthouse, but clean, safe, and warm, with a proper crib for Noah, heating that worked, and a door that locked without having to jiggle the key just right. Adrian didn't hover. He didn't invade her space. But he was present in quiet ways. Groceries showed up when she didn't expect them. A box of baby clothes was left by her door with no note. Once, when her heater made a strange noise at midnight, she called the emergency line, and Adrian showed up himself with a space heater in his trunk, wearing a hoodie and jeans. "Noah doesn't get cold on my watch," he said with a crooked smile. Lena found herself laughing more. At work, she proved herself quickly, smart, organized, and kind. Within weeks, she was offered a full-time position with a raise. She cried in the staff bathroom, alone quietly. She was changing, rebuilding, and in the spaces between exhaustion and hope, a bond was forming. Some evenings, Adrian would visit, no agenda, no pressure. He'd sit on her worn couch while Noah babbled on the floor. They'd talk about life, about books, about how neither of them liked olives or overly chatty Uber drivers. And sometimes they'd say nothing at all. Just sit in the quiet, content to exist in the same room. Lena didn't ask what Adrian wanted from her. He didn't offer anything beyond what he already had. But one night, as they sat sipping tea and watching Noah sleep in his bassinet, Adrian looked at her and said softly, "You've got this fire, Lena." The kind people don't see unless they've burned. Lena turned her head, caught off guard by the words. And what do you see? He looked at her for a long moment, then said, Someone I admire. And in that moment, the space between gratitude and something deeper began to blur. The months drifted by like a quiet tide, not with grand events or dramatic gestures, but with small, consistent moments that stitched something unspoken between Lena and Adrian. Spring arrived slowly, and with it, the city softened. Ice thawed from sidewalks, and sunlight returned to the mornings. Lena had settled into her new rhythm, working 4 days a week at the nonprofit, caring for Noah, learning how to breathe again. She had started smiling more, not just as a reflex, but from something deeper, a kind of safety, a rare peace she hadn't known in years. Not since her mother's illness. Not since Noah's father vanished before the first ultrasound. Adrian remained part of her life, like a steady drumbeat just beneath the surface, never overbearing, never distant. He was simply there. On Tuesday evenings, they had a quiet ritual. After work, Adrian would bring takeout, always from a different local spot, never anything flashy. Lena would make tea, and they'd eat on the floor of her apartment, their backs against the couch while Noah played between them. One night, Adrian brought Indian food. The air was filled with the warm scent of spices. Noah, now crawling, made a determined beeline for the naan bread, smearing yogurt sauce on his chin with a fierce kind of glee. Lena laughed, full and unrestrained. Adrian watched her, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're really good at this," he said. She looked over, wiping Noah's cheek. "Good at what?" "This. Motherhood. Life." She gave him a skeptical look. "You're just saying that because I haven't burned the chai yet." He shook his head. "No. I mean it." There was a pause. Not awkward. Just full. The kind that asked nothing and gave everything. They didn't talk about the past often. But one evening, as the sun bled gold across her window, Lena found herself speaking without meaning to. "Did you know I almost gave Noah up?" Adrian looked up from where he was stacking building blocks with the baby. "No. I was alone. Terrified. The hospital handed me a form and said, 'There are other options.' I held him, and he was so small. I almost signed it. I almost walked away." He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at her, really looked. "But you didn't," he said eventually. "I couldn't." Her voice wavered. He looked at me like he knew me, like he was waiting for me to choose him. Adrian nodded slowly, as if hearing her heart, not just her words. "He chose you too, you know." She blinked at that, then nodded. Once. Tightly. The next week, Adrian invited her and Noah to a park picnic. It wasn't some over-the-top event, just a blanket beneath the trees, fresh sandwiches, and a bottle of juice. Noah shrieked with joy when Adrian lifted him into the air, spinning him in lazy circles. Lena watched them, one hand resting on her knee, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "You're good with him," she said. "I like him," Adrian replied. "He reminds me of someone." "Who?" "You." She looked away, cheeks flushed. It was the first time she let herself imagine what it would be like if things were different. If Adrian wasn't a CEO. If she hadn't come from survival. If the world wasn't so loud with reasons why people like her didn't end up with people like him. But that night, when he brought Noah a book with hand-drawn pictures, just something I made when I couldn't sleep, she knew it didn't matter. The walls she'd spent years building were quietly, stubbornly crumbling. And yet, neither of them spoke the words aloud. There was no rush. No flirtation. Just the kind of intimacy that grows in silence, in shared looks, in hands brushing when passing a teacup. Lena caught herself watching him sometimes. When he laughed at Noah's nonsense babble, or when he talked about his nonprofit team like they were family. He wasn't the man she thought he was when she first heard his voice behind her in the jewelry shop. He was kind, patient, lonely in a way that matched her own. One evening, as they walked back from the park, Noah asleep in his stroller, Adrian glanced over at her. "I've been thinking about something." She raised a brow. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled. "I want to do more with the nonprofit. Expand it. Start mentorship programs, especially for young mothers. Her heart quickened. I want your input, he said. You've lived this. You know what matters more than any board member does. She stared at him. You trust me with that? I trust you with more than that, he said. And he meant it. That night, when Lena was alone again, she stood by the window while Noah slept peacefully in the next room. The city lights blinked in the distance, soft and far away. She pulled open her nightstand drawer and took out the necklace. Her fingers traced the small heart-shaped pendant, the memory of her mother's warmth still etched into the metal. But now there was something new there too. Hope. A bond had grown between her and Adrian. Not forced, not labeled, but real. Not out of need or rescue or gratitude, but from something truer. And for the first time in a very long time, Lena allowed herself to wonder, what if love could grow from kindness? The trees had begun their slow burn into autumn. Leaves rustled down sidewalks in flutters of crimson and gold, and the air tasted of cinnamon and wood smoke. The city, in all its usual rush, moved a little slower in the fall, as if it too understood the need to pause. Adrian stood in the park, the same one where he'd first returned the necklace to Lena. He had come early, before the playground filled with laughing children and weary parents. The picnic bench under the sycamore tree was empty, save for the soft flurry of leaves settling across it. He reached into his coat pocket, not the breast pocket of a suit, but the inner lining of his favorite gray wool jacket. The velvet box rested there again. But it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't an engagement ring. Inside, the necklace shimmered, now cleaned and restored. But more than that, it had been engraved. In delicate cursive, on the back of the heart pendant, were 6 simple words. To the woman who gave everything. He closed the box gently and exhaled. For weeks he'd wrestled with what this day meant. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't about making anything official or dramatic. It was about something deeper. Returning love in the language it was given. Lena arrived just after noon, her dark coat buttoned against the crisp breeze, Noah bundled in her arms, a knit hat covering his ears. His cheeks were pink from the cold, but his eyes lit up the moment they landed on Adrian. "Da!" he squealed, his chubby hands reaching. Adrian laughed, crossing the grass toward them. "Not quite dad yet, little man, but I'll take it." He took Noah gently, lifting him into his arms. The child giggled, grabbing at Adrian's scarf. Lena smiled, watching them like a woman who was still learning to trust good things when they came. They settled onto the bench, Noah between them, chewing on a teething ring as if he were solving the world's problems. Adrian glanced at Lena. There was a stillness in her now, a groundedness that hadn't been there when he first saw her in that jewelry store. She had built her own healing. He had only walked beside her. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "Oh," she teased. "That usually ends in you making life-altering announcements." He chuckled. "Not today." He reached into his coat and handed her the box. Lena looked at it but didn't move right away. Her eyes flicked to his. "What is this?" "Something that always belonged to you," he said. "But now it carries something from me too." She opened it slowly. The necklace lay there like a memory and a promise. When she turned it over and read the engraving, her lips parted, trembling just slightly. Her throat worked hard to find words. "Adrian." He met her gaze. "You gave up something precious once to protect someone you love. And in doing that, you changed my life." She stared down at the necklace again, blinking quickly. "No one's ever said anything like that to me before." He shifted closer. "You don't need to say anything now. You don't owe me anything. I just want you to know. I see you, Lena. All of you. And if you'll have me, I'd like to be part of whatever comes next." Lena closed the box gently and set it on her lap. "I don't have a ring, and I'm not asking for a fairy tale," he added. "But I'd like to wake up every morning knowing I get to see your face. I want to help raise Noah. I want to come home to both of you." Her hand reached for his without hesitation. "That sounds a lot like love, Adrian." "It is." She looked down at Noah, who had dozed off against Adrian's side, his tiny hands curled in contentment. Then she looked back at Adrian, her eyes shining with a fragile, blooming joy. "I think, maybe I've already let you in," she whispered. He didn't answer with words. He simply leaned forward, kissed her forehead, and let the silence wrap around them like a warm blanket. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of their lives shifted again. Adrian still ran his company, but now spent more time at the nonprofit, working side by side with Lena to expand its reach. Lena became the face of the organization's new single-parent initiative. She stood before rooms full of struggling mothers and told her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Noah began calling Adrian Dada by spring, and no one corrected him. They never rushed into a wedding, never posed for press photos. Their life together was quiet, rooted not in spectacle but in truth. Sometimes, late at night, Lena would find the necklace resting on her nightstand and trace the engraving with her thumb. And every time, she would remember that love had come to her not wrapped in flowers or fireworks, but in gentleness. In a man who listened. In a hand that never asked but always offered. In a heart that saw hers and stayed. And so, a new family was not built overnight or through grand declarations, but in moments. In forgiveness. In second chances. In the echo of a simple phrase spoken long ago. "Please give me a fair price." And the man who heard it, and gave her everything instead. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.